Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, your host for Untame the Wild Soul Woman, a conversation series where I am getting to dig in with some really, really powerful and inspiring women about how they transcend the struggles and the fears in their life to really live meaningful lives their own way, not because someone told them they had to do it a certain way, not because it's what they think they're supposed to do. So today I have Jody England with me, and you could read Jody's formal bio below or around somewhere around the video. I met Jody this past summer in 2014 at something called the New Icon Movie. We were both in this really cool creative experience together where we got to create portals and be interviewed and do photo shoots and dress up, and it was really cool to connect with Jody, and I'm excited to share that with you and have a deeper conversation. So Jody, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Liz. So good to see your beautiful face.
Oh, I know. It's so funny how you meet people once and then you just don't see them again for a really long time because we all live in different places. But I also want everyone watching to know, so Jody is this amazing mystical psychic medicine woman. And we had this crazy connection because when I was creating Wild Soul Movement, one of the things I did was I unsubscribed from everything because I didn't want to be creatively influenced or really distracted. And so when I got to the New Icon thing and I met Jody, I'm like, oh, cool, what do you do? And she has a podcast. Is it called Wild Soul Medicine Journey?
Wild Soul Medicine Radio.
Wild Soul Medicine Radio. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then it was even funnier because when I reached out to her about this, I said, oh, I'm doing this thing called Untamed the Wild Soul Woman. And I just realized that your website is untamedyou.com. And it's what's amazing, what I love about Jody so much, that shows you her power, her confidence, her trust in the abundance of the universe, is that, in business, this happens, right? There's a little overlap in what we call things. And I felt a little self-conscious, oh my God, what if this woman thinks that I was copying her stuff and I didn't even know? And there was never any of that. The reaction was just man, we must be serious soul sisters. And I appreciate that so much. And Jody, I'll tell you something funny. The other day, someone followed me on Instagram with the business name of Wild Soul, insert word. I don't want to put them on blast. And I clicked on it because there's that oh, that's my thing. But nothing is ours. So yes. I was inspired by you. I responded very gracefully because I was like, well, I did this too.
Yes. Yes.
So amazing. So the first question, now that story time is over for the time being, that I've been asking every woman is, what do you love about being a woman?
I love that question because I'm more recently becoming in love with being a woman. So most of my life was trying to not be that and very masculine. And so, what I'm really embracing about womanhood now is getting to be mysterious and volatile. And I don't even know what I'm going to do next. And I love that about myself. Yeah, I just feel like we're coming into this space of the emergence of the feminine, and it feels like we're here to step into our leadership and get to be all of this that we've not been allowed to be before. So I feel blessed to be in this space of becoming and really kind of putting together what does feminine look like, because I don't think anybody actually has that figured out, and we're sort of creating it as we go. And so I like that about it too, that it feels very cutting edged.
And so I love what you just said. I don't think anyone knows what it looks like. I don't think anyone ever will. So this has been a really common, I love asking that question because I love watching everyone's reaction, and everyone has loved the question. And so many people have responded similar to you, oh man, I didn't always love it. I mean, that's my story too, right? And this idea of becoming and embracing what each of our unique expression of feminine is. So yes. Can you talk a little bit about what this becoming or discovery process has been like for you?
Absolutely. Well, it was certainly painful, and I tend to do all things with a lot of, suffering and difficulty. And so for me, it was very much a process, and there were like milestones along the way that woke me up.
Mm.
So, at the beginning, actually, I started my life in social work, and I was very feminine, and was in the helping profession, and very much nurturing and all of that. And then I got surprisingly laid off, and I went into the business world with my husband. And so I went completely 180. I wore business suits, cut my hair all off, was one of a very few women in this huge company of all white men who were older than me. And I did that for 10 years. And what ended it was I actually got pregnant with my second child. They were really close together, so just 15 months apart. And I was having a lot of issues with my second pregnancy. But I was in this company where when I got pregnant, I was the only woman that had ever gotten pregnant in a leadership position. So they didn't even have a maternity leave. So I'm trying to pretend like I'm not a woman, and I'm not weak, and I'm not having any issue. And I'm at home, like running my business from my bed, hoping that nobody realizes I'm pregnant, right? Obviously they knew I was pregnant, right? But it was just not allowed. And I had this epiphany in that moment, in that process of like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I sacrificing potentially the life of my child and myself for some company that doesn't even know that this is happening or care? And so that was the first big awakening for me of like, I got to figure out what this is about. And I was having a girl the second time. And so it was this connection to like, what do I want for her? And so that was the beginning. And then it was, it's been a 13-year journey of, putting one piece in front of the other and doing it all wrong, and, creating a feminine business for women that was completely masculine. And
That's amazing. And I bet so many women watching could totally relate to that too.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I was like, well, I'll work for myself, so I'll do it this better way. But I really just did the same motions, but, in a different space.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really, really in these last couple years have been a lot more actually connecting to feminine and what that means, and the vulnerability that goes with that, which was not a part of my experience or my vernacular. I had really zero frame of reference for how do I be this powerful of a woman and be met by any masculine, right?
I was writing down what you said about how to be this powerful of a woman and still be met by the masculine. We'll come back to that. There was something else you said in the process. You mentioned milestones.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm not getting your video right now.
Yeah, let me try again. There we go. Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can. Great.
Okay,
we're back.
Thanks.
So I think you said, so one of the milestones was being pregnant with your daughter.
Yes.
After you had her, what were there a couple other milestones that you don't mind sharing with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I had her, I went on maternity leave from my job and never went back. And I started this process of finding myself, of figuring out, how does this work? How do I do this? And of course, the first couple coaches I hired were super masculine dudes. Right? Yeah. And so it was this very masculinized version of law of attraction and mindset, and you got to have skin in the game, and you got to be challenging yourself, and you got to be taking risks. And, so I went down that path, and I learned a lot about energy and mindset, but I completely just did more of the same. Like, started a couple of businesses that failed, had 2 babies in diapers and 3 businesses, and, working like a maniac, completely unhappy, completely emasculating my husband because he couldn't keep up, and I thought he should save me. And, so there was all of that happening. And largely what I was connected to always was how unhappy I was. Yeah. Like, I'm doing all these things out in the world. I should be happy. I should, at this, when I have this home and this husband and these, all of that, like, what is missing? And so I had this intuition that the missing piece had something to do with me, but I was doing so much personal work that I couldn't imagine what that thing was, And it was only after I really started going inward, like turning toward, I'm going to figure this out. Because I knew that my deepest commitment was to being full and satisfied in myself. And that's where I had been missing the boat, because I thought all of the external stuff would somehow do that for me.
Yeah. And this is like, I love it because it's so common. And this has come up so much lately with my private clients of, I typically attract women who have already done a lot of work on themselves. And they're like, arms thrown up, what the hell? Yes. Why am I still not feeling connected? Why do I still feel a bit lost? It's what you said, feeling full and satisfied. So I would love to track back for a moment to what you said about emasculating your husband. Because I think this is something, and I'm so glad to be speaking with a woman who's married with kids and has done that and is still in that relationship. Like, you've come out of it. Because I think as powerful women, so for the powerful single women watching, you know you are, and you know that your fear is that no man can handle you. And I say this has been my number one fear in life, right? Yes. That I'm either going to have a successful career or a successful relationship, and it's probably not going to be possible to have both. I only recently released that fear, like this year, as I have finally met a partner who can hold the space for me. But I've emasculated men unintentionally. It's like the worst feeling in the world because you're like, I don't want to do this, but I am. So can you talk about how you shifted out of that? And even like, I don't know if there was any healing that needed to happen there, and if you're comfortable, if you don't want to go that deep into your personal relationship, that's okay.
No, I'm an open book.
Cool.
This has been such a journey for me. I'm lucky enough to be married to my soulmate. We've been married for 17 years. We've known each other since the 6th grade. And so there was always this feeling like, I know I'm going to be with him, but, of course we're medicine for each other. And so, he's kind of a surfer dude that's not really driven, and, he's lucky and happy to be with me, but he's not really an earner. And, so he loves me intensely, but there's never been that like meeting in the drive. Mm-hmm. And so for years, that was kind of the thing, is when I was not very awake, I would just use him as my punching bag. So all of the places I was unhappy in myself would just be like, it's your fault. It's totally you,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not nice. I was not nice to him. And of course it's a co-creation, right? It's a co-creation. So I would go after him, then he'd put his tail between his legs, then I'd go after him more, right? So that's how we do that dance. And it was really as I started in this process of going inward that I, because I've always been about radical self-responsibility. So I believe that whatever's in your space, you're creating. So I would, take this really hard look at like, well, what is he serving? Why do I have him here? And how do I start to heal that so I can allow him to show up in a different way? And I remember one time I was getting coaching from incidentally from a guy, right? My second masculine guru. But it was really insightful. And I was telling him, something that I was super triggered about my husband about, and, there was this thing that he was doing that was like, oh my God, it was like, I would take these quantum leaps and I would be like, I can't be with you if you're going to be so asleep. So he was serving this purpose for me where it was like I got to be righteous and enlightened.
Yeah.
But really it was like, it's completely distorted, because if you're enlightened, you don't actually have to compare yourself to who isn't, you can just let them show.
It's so good.
So good. So I remember one time I was lamenting to my coach about, the situation that I was in with my husband who was never going to meet me. And he said, the way you have your energetic system set up, he has no other choice but to meet you the way he is. And I was like, what? What? Because I really thought it was like him, even my ego still wanted to really believe that he needed to do something. And so, I just got in enough pain about it that I was like, okay, it's me. Like, I'm going to go look and see. And, and that's really what it is. Like, when this powerful as women, we have a lot of fear underneath that. Like,
Yeah.
that's why we need to be in control, because fundamentally the world seems unsafe, but we're disconnected from that. And so we come out just badass. Like, I'm not actually afraid of anybody and I don't need anything, you know? And so it was me starting to get real with, you know, the level of fear that I was carrying, particularly the fear around being supported and being disappointed.
Yes.
And being needing something and having it not show up for me, you know?
I'm laughing because this is me right now. Like, this is, yeah, just keep going. It's so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as we started to heal that, you know, we got in more conversation about it, he and I, because we were both sort of in our private shame about it. So there was another really beautiful moment in our relationship where a different coach had said to me, you need to clean it up with him. You need to own that you've been doing this emasculating thing. And I mean, I was like, I know it, but I had to go out to dinner with him and drink a couple glasses of wine before I could get up the courage to actually do it. So we're like driving home in the car, and I said, okay, I just want to let you know. And like, this is a big deal for somebody who has the ego that I had, you know? I said, I just want to let you know, like, I'm realizing how much I've emasculated you over the years and really, you know, tried to control everything in our relationship. And it was just because I was scared. And I just want to let you know I'm sorry. And I thought he would say, oh my God, thank you. It's been so hard to live with you. You know, like, that's what I thought he would say. And he said, I want to apologize for letting you. I know. And I was like, oh my God, I love you. I mean, it was this beautiful opening for both of us to step out of the shame of the pattern and then to begin to each of us start to unravel our piece.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's small. It's like a tiny dance, right? Like, I show up slightly more vulnerable. He shows up slightly more meeting me, you know, and then we play with, can we allow that? And what does it feel like? And, you know, so it's not just in a moment it goes. Like, it really is this fundamental dance that we're in, where we're still learning. Just this morning we were in a, you know, and it's because it's mostly been going very well, but now he's thinking of coming into my business, which I've wanted for years. And so I'm trying to find in my system, where can I allow that? But I operate really at my highest level of genius in my business. So it's even dicier for him to find a spot there. Mm-hmm. And then I gave him a task and he basically fucked it up. And I was mad. And then I was taking the blowback from my clients and I was like, listen, you know? So yeah. And we're, you know, we've evolved enough that I was able to speak my truth, and then we came back together and it was like, thanks for the talk. And like, I'm taking my piece from that creation and he's taking his piece, and, you know, so then we just keep expanding.
Yeah, it's that ownership. It's so amazing. So I did another one of the interviews in the series is with this woman I love who's a really amazing sex and relationship coach. Her name is Kim Anami. And one of the things that came up in that conversation is so present to this, which was, we are fed this idea of what relationships should be like. We are read fairy tales as children. We watch romantic comedies and sitcoms. And there really is a lot of programming and conditioning around, like, yeah, like the Prince Charming, or like gender roles, which have shifted so much. Like, yes, gender roles have shifted, but our idea of the relationship model hasn't as much. In some places, like, there's some really progressive communities, and then some people, it's still so traditional. I think traditional is probably still the global majority. And so she was saying people freak out in relationships when it gets tough because they're like, love is supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be like this. It's a struggle. And then they just quit. Whereas it's like, no, if your deepest, darkest stuff is getting stirred up, this is a great, and your partner's not running, this is exactly where you need to be.
Yes. You know, that's one of the things I preach all the time, which is, you know, triggers are your portal to freedom.
Yeah.
So I know I have lots of friends that are in polyamorous relationships or open relationships, or, have never been married, and even though they're really on this path, it feels to me like everybody leaves way too soon. Shit comes up, and then it's like, I don't think we're on the same path, or I don't think it's meant to be, or this isn't my soulmate. And I think largely all of that stuff is bullshit too, because I think actually, I would definitely not be the person I am today if I hadn't stuck this out. And there were certainly times when I was sure that we were not actually meant to be together, or that maybe he's my soulmate, but this lifetime he's not getting it. Like all of those places where your ego just is wanting to turn it off. And I always tell my clients, because I get lots of women who come to me when they're thinking of leaving a relationship or considering divorce or considering marriage, right? But it's turbulent. And I always just say, there's no rush. Yeah. There's no rush to go. And as soon as you go and get on your own, one of my favorite books is by Karen Mazin Miller. It's called Mama Zen, and it's about parenting. And she's a Buddhist priest who's a mom. And she says, I used to fancy myself enlightened before I had kids. And it was only because I got my own way all the time. Yes. Right? Yeah. And it feels like exactly that in relationship. Like when you're on your own, you can be like, oh yeah, I totally got this. And as soon as your rubber meets the road in relationship, you're like, what?
That's literally exactly what just happened to me when I moved in with Mike. I'm like, damn, I was living in a really great bubble, and that shit just popped.
Totally.
And this is a big thing that I'm so glad you said about triggers. So this is something that I had personally resisted for quite a while. I'm like, no, like not everything is a trigger. Like not everything is projection. And I'm like, everything. It's true.
I remember your Facebook post about that. And
Son of a bitch. It's true. It's always me.
I know, right?
Yeah, and it's what you said. And I think this is a lot about, like, your story was just full of this. It's not about resisting the pain of it. It's being like, yeah, like this is going to be really hard. But how do you react? How can you own it as like lovingly and compassionately to yourself and the people involved as possible, and just acknowledge that it's hard. Like I don't think anything that you described was selling this idea that it's supposed to be simple or easy. In fact, it's really not.
Yeah. Yeah, it just is what it is. And and so much of it is about being able to create a space in your relationship to just be where you are.
Yeah.
And so like we did that dance for many years where it was like, well, you should fix that and you should fix that and you. And that sounds like your trigger, which is also sort of a bypass of everybody really diving in to do the work. And now it's like, well, it's all a co-creation. So here we are. So we both have to start owning if we're going to move out of this.
Yeah. And I know we're talking about romantic relationships, but this goes for friendships, family, like any relationship in your life that's valuable that you want to stay in long term. So
absolutely.
That's super great. Thank you for sharing all of that. And then, so also around the topic of trigger and this self-ownership and the radical responsibility, I feel like, what are some of the ways you've observed in your own experience and those of your clients where we don't see? So like blind spot is a big thing. Because I really fancied myself as a person who never plays victim and never blames. But I found myself in some real deep, like, pointing the finger. And I was like, I didn't even know I could still do this. How do you either help people, or how did you, it sounded like you said at some point there was like a conversation with a coach and someone had to reflect back to you, like, here's the piece that you're not seeing. How do we see the blind spots, I guess is the question.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple answers to that. So first of all, definitely coaching, right? Like I always have a coach. I firmly believe you cannot navigate it by yourself. My husband resisted coaching for years and just started a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And it has made so much difference in our relationship because now he can keep up with owning his pieces. So 1,000,000% you can't see your own blind spots. And, in the work that I do, we've identified what are called soul medicine paths. And so there's like a shortcut to understanding your wounding, right? And like, this is what your gig is going to be. So this is the lens you look at life in. So you and I, the reason we're so similar is because we're on the same soul path. And part of those soul paths for you and I is control, trust, betrayal, So those are all the pieces that we know we'll always be working with. So
Yeah.
even as you expand and become more and more conscious, then they just get more and more nuanced. So maybe it's not in your relationship, or maybe it is in like, the next level of sexuality, or the next, whatever, or it might be, in your relationship with the divine or whatever, but that is going to be the mode. So once you understand that, it brings a giant chunk out of your subconscious. And so like my husband knows my path, I know his path. So it's like you can extend some more grace because you can see why they're doing what they're doing, and that it's not necessarily personal, it's just how they operate in the world.
Yeah. I really love that. Talk more about these soul paths. Is this something that you have created yourself?
Yes.
It
evolved.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it evolved out of this work that I do where I take people back to the moment of their ego formation in this lifetime. And so I was doing that with people, and then we'd have this huge epiphany of like, oh my gosh, that explains everything, like that trigger you had and that thing you do. And so after I did that for a while, I started noticing there are certain essences that go together, right? There's certain patterns that seem to go together. So those all came into form as these 5 soul medicine paths. Cool. And we each have and then they each have their the way that they exchange energetically with the world. So like you and I are primary great mothers, which is we're nurturers, we're charismatic leaders, we're great at taking care of other people, and we tend to leak energy for ourselves. So we put ourselves last on the list. It's hard to nurture ourselves. And by nurturing, I don't mean just self-care, but like actually being soft with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like warrior is our secondary. So the warrior is the one that has the control issues and like, I'm strong and powerful and I'll fight you and I'm not going to be vulnerable. And that energetic exchange with life tends to look more stingy, right? So like we withhold energy and we can freeze people out. And it's like, if you piss me off, you're dead. Like I could take or leave you in relationship, kind of feeling. Yeah. It can be hard to get to know us or get close to us because we tend to have, we're really good at boundaries. And then the shadow of that is, it's hard to get close to us, And then the other paths, there's the mystic. Do you want me to tell about the rest, or do you want me to just name what they are?
I'm loving it. If you don't mind. Yeah. This is so great.
Yeah. So the mystic path, they tend to be energetically up. So these are the women who are super flighty. They're into universal oneness. They see spirits and, all of that. And it's not just, it's like the paths are determined really by your core wounding. So, if you're like, I'm psychic, but I'm not a mystic. Yeah. So it's more like, what is your core wounding? So the wounding for a mystic is they feel like they're here by mistake. Mm. And so they kind of ghost through this life, and that looks energetically like they have a really hard time landing. So they have sporadic relationships, they hardly have any money, and like they're the wisest, most connected people you meet, but they don't have 2 nickels to rub together. They can't hold a job, similar with everything that's related to the root chakra. That's tough for them.
Yeah.
And then we have shapeshifters, and shapeshifters orient to the world from really permeable energetic boundaries. So they chameleon into other people's energy. They're super easy to be with. They tend to be great supporters. They're usually taking care of their families and their sick relatives, and they're great assistants and people like that. But the shadow for them is they lose themselves. Yeah. So they don't actually have an identity outside of relationship. So they tend to serially go from one to another. It's hard for them to earn money for themselves. They do it much better in support roles. Mm-hmm. And so the unraveling for them is to find a place within themselves that's home, and to have the primary relationship be with themselves instead of through everyone else, or what they can do for everyone else. And then the 5th one is the heroine or the hero. So my husband is a hero, and he's kind of the opposite of the warrior, right? So heroes are very appropriate. They like the rules. They follow the rules. They do very well with accountabilities. They're super loyal, very nice. Their whole thing in life is to not ruffle any feathers. And so they always take the path of like least possible friction. But the problem with them, the shadow, is they have a hard, they're disconnected from their own authentic voice, right? So they don't actually know who they are, because they just want to please you. And so this is the rub in a relationship like my husband and I, where I'm super opinionated. I know exactly what I want and what I don't want. And he just wants to please me, and I just want him to meet me, right? So this is why we're medicine, because I'm teaching him about identity and boundaries, and he's teaching me about softness and allowing other people's ways to be okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What an amazing, amazing framework. I love that so much. And what I appreciate about that, and I've discovered this a lot since doing Wild Soul Movement and now working with so many women on like this deeper level into themselves, much like you do, is that the more we understand and accept ourselves, the more, like you said, we can have like so much more grace and compassion with our interactions with other people, because we're just different.
Yes.
And the same way that I want people to just like let me be me, I got to do the same for other humans.
Yes.
And then it's just easy. And then all this energy that you said, like, that we leak into trying to like get people, control, manipulate, whatever, we can just drop that because we're like, cool, that's your thing. Like, I don't need to waste any time or energy on that. So what fun work.
Yeah. So fun. And it works, it actually brings like, I always joke and say, if there was an app for consciousness, this would be it, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's this like very quick up leveling of getting out of the minutia of whatever details you're stuck in, and then understanding at a fundamental level how someone is put together. So like this morning, the rub was around, I had asked my husband to look at the time zones for all of the women in my class, right? And there's 50 different women around the world. So he gave it to me, and it was kind of this summary thing. So I put it out. Long story short, he summarized there was two women in Australia. He just chose one time zone for Australia because he didn't really know where the other city was.
Yeah.
So we were 3 hours off, and it now makes a woman having to get up in the middle of the night, right?
I got it.
So my rub, because this is how I do, high integrity, details. I want people to be seen and known and heard. So I'm now pissed that he's created this situation, and he's like, but it just doesn't register for me, like all of that detail. I just thought you wanted a summary,
Yeah.
And so we were having this beautiful conversation. First, we were stuck in the details of how should I have communicated it differently?
Yeah.
How should you have shown up differently? And then we dropped below that into what's fundamentally at work here. So what's fundamentally at play is I don't feel supported, which is right on my soul path, and he's not connected with his own purpose. So he's going through motions based on what he thinks I want that he doesn't actually give a shit about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, oh, no wonder that didn't work, right? We were completely set up for it. So then we can go from there, both owning our pieces, right? So now he's working on connecting with purpose. I'm opening up to like softening to support. And now we're all much happier.
I love it. One of the other things that's come up a lot in these interviews is whether it's someone who wants to like call something in or manifest or track something, whatever language you use, or someone who's on like a path of like personal development, self-discovery. I never like to use the word enlightenment, but some people do. It all just takes time, you know?
Does.
And I think that's a big conditioning piece of our culture is we have this idea, we see the potential, and we're like, cool, I want it now.
Yes.
But I love that you mentioned, like this journey with my husband has taken 13 years. It's like,
17.
Buckle
17.
up, people,
Exactly.
And same in your business, right? And developing this soul path thing, like this is not what you did before. How do you were going to say something, say what you wanted to say, that last minute discussion.
I just want to add, so that is such a trap for me and my clients as well. Like what I had noticed is as I'm coaching people, they always assume that people who have the 6-figure a year coaching business somehow have a different life or don't have issues. And I'm coaching those people. So it was always frustrating to be like, no, they're doing the same thing as you. There is no finish line. And in September, we did this thing, the Woman Come Undone Experience, where we had those new paradigm leaders come and do a public healing session where I coached them through something they teach on. And it was so liberating for people to see that, just because someone has a 7-figure a year business, she's facing exactly the same things you are. She's on the same soul path. So for me, we've just incorporated that right into the work is we're all undone always. Like, it's not like in 17 more years, I'm going to be more done. I'm doing the same things because it's my soul path. It's the arc of all the lifetimes.
Yeah.
So it's this lifetime and all the other ones.
Yeah. It's just so, and it's so permission giving too, to be like, yeah, like just get to do your thing. And it's funny because I've noticed in Wild Soul Movement, because there's different topics and a mantra every week. And I'm like, without fail, every week, every topic, I am always being called more deeper into my own piece, my own expression of whatever it is, or my own experience of whatever it is. And I love that term undone, because there is, right? Like no friggin' finish line. But since our society is set up in checks and balances, achievements, milestones, you got the house, you got the kids, get the next promotion, get the next car, get the next thing. And those are like things that you can cross off a list. This journey you're describing, you can't really cross stuff. There's no list, right? Because it's the same thing. It just gets deeper and deeper. And we just understand it better and navigate it better, but it's still there.
It is. And I think, it's so sexy in the coaching industry to tell people that you need to pay this money so you can get like me, so you can be done like me, and it's really hard to resist that, because then everybody's conditioned towards some kind of a fix. Who wants to buy the program that says you're never done, right? And we're going to do some really deep work, not done,
Yeah. Listen, sign up. The answer is you're going to be better off than when you started, but you're not going to be done. That's so funny. And it's the truth. But yeah, like all those labels and all those things are just, it's a trap. It's a big fat trap. And I love that you're just getting people the hell out of it. So, Jody, my last question that I'll just ask is, under this topic, which is your topic as well, Untame the Wild Soul Woman, is there anything I didn't ask you that you really want to share?
Yeah, I think we may have touched on it a few pieces, at the beginning, but I think it bears repeating, because every time I do one of these, it's like our egos always want to attach themselves to, there is a leader, there is a guru. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I start doing it like Liz does it, and if I do my relationship the way Jody does it, so really what they're saying is that. And what I really just want to be clear with people is what we're actually saying, what untaming means for me is you doing the opposite of what you've been programmed to do. Yes. So for some people, like if you're a mystic, the untaming might look like you finally land and you start getting a job and you make some income. If you're somebody like me, the untaming looks like not being a workaholic and actually creating space for yourself and starting to be soft and gentle, So untaming doesn't mean you wear feathers in your hair and, you cuss a lot and because you see that happening, right? Where people are sort of perverting what wild looks like, that it has to mean a certain thing. And what I just want to invite people is what's untamed about it is being who you really are. Like that's the fingerprint that nobody else can fit into, and that's what's revolutionary. Like the irreverence of not actually being like anybody else, that's what's wild.
I love that because when I asked another woman in the series, Denise, this question, she goes, I'm not really wild. Like I'm pretty like even keel, low key. And I'm like, but that's your expression of it. And I think people assume it needs to be this, like you said, feathers, like running around naked, like going to Burning Man, like doing all these things. Yeah. And again, it's those labels. It's working with them, seeing where they influence you and being like, cool, sure, yeah, that's me, or no, it's really not. So that was a really beautiful way to put it. Thank you. Tell people where can they find you?
You can check us out at untamedyu.com or wildsoulmedicine.com is the radio show.
So amazing. So thank you, everyone. Check her out. Love this soul path work. I'm actually about to go check that out myself, to be quite honest with you. And then that's it. So we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Love you.
When I came to the chapter about the goddess Durga, who has 8 different arms, and she is really a warrior goddess for the most part, but the 8 different arms represent different skill sets or different tools or different parts of herself that she might call on, depending on what the situation might need. For the first time ever, I felt myself really connecting to a feminine energy and really being able to identify myself as feminine, but in the context of this archetype.